Moni, I see that you're here, which means you have a question.
Yes, I do. Right now, Lunk is AFK, so
Okay.
when he does get back, he'll be next. We have one from Rizah, that I like. What do
Okay.
you think about the idea to expand the current classes instead of making new ones? For example, a mage tank, range paladin, melee warlock,
Uh-huh.
or including support characters like aura, specs, or buffers. I understand Final Fantasy has some classes that are more in the support role that don't necessarily heal, but they provide assistance in other methods.
Yeah. So Final Fantasy have classes like Bard, for example, that is meant to be more support. Now, I'm not going to say that Final Fantasy always gets it 100% right, because I seem to recall towards just before Endwalker came out, Bard is supposed to be a support class, but their DPS was absolutely off the fucking charts. But yeah, Final Fantasy leans very heavily into this support classes, DPS classes, tank classes, healer classes, you know? And if you think about it, World of Warcraft used to be that. So a lot of people don't even know this because a lot of people didn't play back then. But back in the day, warlocks, paladins, shamans were support. They weren't actually main classes. So you even had things like, and sit down if you haven't played this long, you used to have things like off tanks. Now you might think to yourself, we still have off tanks. No, you don't. You used to have off tanks where certain tank classes just weren't good main tanks. They were amazing off tanks because they had massive AoE that could pick up lots of ads, which was usually what the off tank would do. They had maybe a bunch of really big cooldowns, so they could taunt off the main tank, take a couple of huge shots with all of their cooldowns up, and then the main tank would take back, right? But this was usually very much based around your class. Warrior is a good example, Brian, of the original sort of support tank, where they're not the main tank because as main tanks go, you had better classes. You had things like Guardian Druids that were really good because they had stupidly big health pools, and they were basically called mana sponges at the time because basically they had so much health that they just could not die, and healers could just always get them back up. And warriors were incredibly good because they could pick up a lot of ads, but also because they had massive cooldowns to take a lot of damage, but those cooldowns were on quite a long cooldown. So they could only do it a couple of times a fight. Your paladins, for example, especially your retribution paladins, could heal as well as DPS. So usually what would happen with this is your support class would obviously not have as much damage, but to make up for the fact that they lack that raw damage, they would be able to bring something to the fight. Now, the problem, Blizzard never actually educated the player base on the importance of these sort of classes, these kind of more support classes. And also because Blizzard never actually gave these support classes the support that would actually turn them into true support classes. Because if you think back to Warlocks, Warlocks was a support class, and the main reason they were considered support classes was because a Warlock had health stones, which obviously for the rest of the group, really cool. They had soul stones, which obviously for the group was really good, and then of course they buffed everyone else's magic damage. Okay, that's 3 abilities. That's kind of cool, but 3 abilities that mostly... So, Soulstones back in the day, again, for those of you that don't remember, Soulstones back in the day, you had to apply the Soulstone to a character before they died. You couldn't do it afterwards. Before a fight, you would basically choose the most important person in the group and you would give them your Soulstone. Because if they died, they could just get back up, right? And this was sort of... but that's not enough. You need a toolkit as a support class. For Paladins, it was basically just the ability to heal. That's really all they could do. Yeah, it was a free race. That's also true. Because it would not count as a battle race, and therefore it was basically for free. Someone could just get immediately back up, but obviously we are talking about the utility as a support class. Now, to the question at hand. I think World of Warcraft is in a very precarious position because on the one hand, yes, I personally think we already have too many classes in World of Warcraft, and before people go, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? We have too many classes. We still need this, this, and this, and this, and this class. Well, I'm talking from a gameplay perspective, so I'm talking purely from a balance perspective. I think World of Warcraft has too many classes. Remember, more classes means more abilities, means more balance, means more talents now because we have talent trees coming back. And ultimately, this means either you eventually run out of things to give every single class, and so you become generic in what you give every single class. So eventually you end up with every class basically having everything that every other class has, because there's only so many things that you can give them. Or you run into a thing where not every class will get new abilities with every single expansion, which then feels really bad if you're one of the classes that doesn't get anything new for that expansion, or maybe you get something shit for that expansion, because you have to eventually jump into generic crap because you only have that much shit that you can give. So I do believe that it's about time for a restructuring of the class system in World of Warcraft. Something that I personally would be really fond of, but of course I know that not everyone would be. But something that I would really love is Blizzard looking at the spec system within World of Warcraft and figuring out, do we need all of the specs that we have? Is it absolutely necessary to have all of these specs? So, for example, you have Enhancement Shaman and you have Elemental Shaman. Is there not a way for someone to be an Elemental Shaman or an Enhancement Shaman, but prioritizing ranged over melee or vice versa? So you don't end up with two specs, you just have the one spec, but basically through talents you get to build your playstyle. So if you prefer to be melee, you take the talents that turn you into more of a melee shaman, and if you prefer to be ranged, you take the talents that turn you more into a ranged shaman. But do we need all of these abilities? As a warlock, for example, do you really need Destruction, Affliction, and Demonology? Is there a way to bring these specs closer together, maybe eliminate one of them entirely and incorporate that into the others? So Demonology would make very good sense here, where you could very easily be an Affliction and or a Destruction Warlock, but with more reliance on demons, therefore no longer needing the Demonology tree, but just buffing your demons and giving you more demon summons as an Affliction or as a Destruction Warlock in this instance. However Blizzard does it, I do believe that we are approaching that point. Fewer specs, maybe 2 at most for every single class, and those who used to have 4 maybe come down to 3. This could open up more classes being created into the future, but also could just open up more variety within each of these specs. Because now that you've merged Elemental and Enhancement into a single Shaman spec, you have a lot more freedom to broaden what an Elemental / Enhancement Shaman can do. Right? So you can give it a lot more tools. If we go to the second part of his question, and he asked, should Blizzard embrace the sort of support classes? I don't think so. Because I think ultimately in World of Warcraft, the player base was never educated on what a support class actually is. What do you think happens if Blizzard brought back support classes? Suddenly all Retribution Paladins log in and their damage is like 20% lower than all other fucking specs. What do you think happens next?
Mass exodus from that class. I mean, you're not going to have... People are going to shift to... Well, let's face it. They're going to shift to whatever has the biggest numbers in whatever sphere they want to play in. Healer, tank, or DPS. So if you do go back to making, like, Holy Paladins is another example. Back in Vanilla, they were more of just in there for minor healing, but also to keep those blessings going. They weren't a main healer for quite some time.
Yeah.
main healer was always priest or druid, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, your paladin, holy paladins would be pure tank healer. So you'd usually have a holy paladin in 25 mans where you could afford to have a healer that only heals tanks. In 10 man, you usually wanted to go for holy priest or disc priest. If you had a good disc priest, you would go for disc, and then something like a druid because they can also blanket, and the disc can do the job of the holy paladin by keeping the tanks alive. This is at least how we used to do Wrath of the Lich King heroic 10 man. For 25 man, we had a paladin, we had a disc priest, and we actually had a holy priest and a druid for Lich King heroic. But yeah, you used to be a lot more limited in what you could do because some classes were just support, right? And therefore, you wouldn't take those, right?
Yeah,
and they would just never get playtime because if you are going to take a holy paladin into a 10 man, the other two healers have to be really good because they have to keep everyone else alive because the holy paladin basically can't keep fucking shit alive. He can keep the tanks alive because everything is single target heals. As soon as they have to start healing the raid, they're done, right? They just can't contribute because all they can do is flash of light. This is back in the Wrath days where holy paladins would literally spam flash of light, never run because they could just drop a judgment and get all the mana back. And that was it. So it really limits. That's the problem with World of Warcraft. And probably not just World of Warcraft, that's the problem with modern day video games. As soon as you have a game where competitiveness is everything, if you nerf someone's competitiveness, you're fucked, right? You're fucked because no one's going to play that. And I just quickly want to, because someone in chat here, Iron Ghost, there is no such thing as spec identity. Specs from a lore perspective is bullshit. There is no specs in World of Warcraft from a canonical lore perspective. So spec identity doesn't matter. Class identity is the only thing that matters. Specs can go suck a dick. In my opinion.
Yeah, a good counter that I have to that comment is actually just look at Heroes of the Storm with they have 3 priest classes there with Tyrande, Anduin, and Whitemane, and they all are basically just the priest.
Yeah.
Sure, they have some abilities that make you think that they might be more discipline focused or something like that, but Tyrande herself is just a priestess of Accolonn, has nothing to do with the class itself except for its identity as being someone that channels power from another source.
Yeah. I mean, look, if we're talking canon, so we're talking story, which World of Warcraft is. It's a story first, and the story is supposed to influence the game. From a story perspective, there are no specs in World of Warcraft. Jaina isn't a frost mage. Jaina isn't a fire mage, and Jaina isn't an arcane mage. Jaina is a mage. That's it. She has power over everything. If she needs to cast fireballs, she can. If she needs to bring ice down, she can. The Jaina favors ice, and that's fine, but she's not. There's no such thing as an ice mage. It's just a mage.
Yeah, the closest she gets to being considered a frost specialization is the little snippet of lore that they built on in the Rise of the Lich King novelization, where she couldn't control fire magic very well, and Antonidas, the Archmage of Dalaran, specifically had her practice fire magic in the dungeons, and eventually she just preferred to rely on frost magic. Her fire magic is just on par, it's just she's a little emotionally and scarred from what she has done with fire magic.
Yeah.
And conversely, Kael'thas is the same way. We primarily see him using fire and arcane magic, but he is just as powerful with frost magic too. He uses that also in that same novelization, frost spells against Arthas up in Northrend.
True.
So there's really no specialization focus, it's all about the class, and the characters in WoW that are those particular class embody all of the specs, even if you only see them using a specific like spells lineup.
Yeah. I mean, Iron Ghost, the thing that you're saying there, my system would not remove that in any way, shape, or form. My system would move closer to that, where you get to differentiate yourself based on a choice that you make with your talents, but you still have access to all of those other things. So you can still cast a fireball if needs be. You can still use Dragon Breath if needs be. You just build your class to be more frost focus, or to be more arcane focus, or to be more fire focused. We're not removing anything. We're literally just saying merge that which could be differentiated purely through talents and doesn't have to be different specs with completely different talents, because that's the problem with having 3 specs as a shaman. If you have 3 specs as a shaman, you need talent trees for every single one of those specs. It does not take long before each and every one of those specs start to feel very generic and boring. Because how many talents can you truly come up with for different shaman specs before you have to start recycling some of those talents for the specs because you're running out of fucking talents to give the spec? That's the issue. We are future-proofing here. We have to think in the future. This is not an unlimited game. There's not an unlimited amount of possibilities, because at some point it's going to get ridiculous. Unless, of course, we're okay with eventually giving shamans the ability to pick up a fish and throw it at a boss. That's one of your talents now, right? If you fight anywhere near the water, the shaman will literally pick up a fish and just fucking chuck it at the boss, because we don't have anything else to give him. So fish toss is the new ability there, right? And for warriors, we've come up with an ability called belt slap. So, because we couldn't think of any more abilities to give them, the warrior removes their belt and just slaps whatever the fuck is in front of him with the belt and then puts the belt back on. We could start adding abilities like that, because that's where we end up if we have millions of different specs into just a game that everyone keeps wanting more and more classes. People want more classes, but they also want all their specs. And I'm saying I don't think you can have both. I might be wrong. Maybe there is a world in which you can have all of it. I just don't think that could work. In the long run, at least, I don't think that could work. Moni, what else? Was there anything else about that, or was that the question?
No, that was the question. I will leave you on this before I bring Lunk in, that I kind of agree with you that we can't maintain the current number of specs that we have without pigeonholing classes and then limiting ourselves on new classes. An example that I know is still sore to you, as well as a lot of other warlocks, is the introduction of Demon Hunter and how it removed what demonology was before the Demon Hunter was introduced. And then now it's still, in my opinion, struggling to find its own niche or its own life sense.
Yeah, I mean, literally that, right? In order to bring out the Demon Hunter, Blizzard had to gut Demonology Warlocks. And now Demonology Warlock still doesn't really find its place. It's powerful, but I know very few people that actually like playing it. There are people, obviously, there's always going to be people that like something, but more people would prefer Affliction or Destruction to Demonology, if all things being equal. So yeah, I just think you have to think to the future. Whenever you make video games like World of Warcraft, you have a game that's going to run for a very long time. You want to think what happens in 3 or 4 expansions. With every single expansion, we have to add 2 or 3 new talents to every single class. And not just to every single class, we have to add 2 or 3 new talents to every single spec for every single class. That's 37 specs. I believe it's 37 or 38 specs that needs 3 new abilities. That puts you on what? We're on 114 or some shit like that? No, it's less than that. It's like 79, 110. 110 new talents that needs to be added to the game every single expansion to keep things fresh and interesting. Even if you half that, you're at 55 new talents that need to be added every single expansion just to keep things fresh. How many expansions before you just no longer have anything to add? I don't know what to add here. There's too much. It's too many. So you have to think in terms of future. You can't just go, well, fuck it. We'll figure it out. Because that's where we land into problems. But anyways, Moni, let's get Lonk in here. And
Absolutely. He has a question that I've been burning to have asked. It's very interesting, so I'll bring it up.
all right.